Are you ready to learn about the property market? Then you're in the right place. This is Everything Property by Pivotal Homes, where we connect Australia's best developers, agents, home buyer specialists, wealth creation experts, and property advisors to the people of Australia. Broadcasted from Whitehorse Studios on the Gold Coast. And now, here are your hosts, Hayden Ashton and Tom Egan.
G'day listeners and viewers right across Australia. Welcome to Everything Property by Pivotal Homes, where we connect Australia's best developers, agents, home buyer specialists, wealth creation experts and property advisors to the people of Australia. Today's guest is one who is well versed in everything property. He has over 20 years of experience in development and marketing, has an in-depth understanding of the property and financial services sector. He's held senior marketing and operational roles at ASX-listed developers and ASX Top 100 financial services companies, and he's been involved in the sales, marketing and leasing of over $2 billion worth of residential, retail and commercial property in Queensland, Victoria and South Australia. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Andrew Thomson from CFMG Capital. How are you, mate?
Good, thanks. Thanks for having me, Hayden.
Mate, thanks for coming on. Tommy, you good?
Good, mate. Fired up for this one.
Mate, as I mentioned there, you've got a massive resume of experience right across the financial services and property, which we'll touch on in depth, because having a man of your calibre to talk through what is such a evolving market in the property space is going to be really, really insightful for our listeners. But first of all, what I'd like to do is get context on yourself, how you came into the property game, the industry, CMFG, their model, and what you guys are up to.
Yeah, I would say that I almost fell into the property market by accident, or the industry. I finished school back in the 90s, which seems like a long time ago these days, and went to uni, didn't really have much idea of what I intended to do. I was one of those students that was good with humanities, not good with maths, so I started studying law.
Yeah, right.
Changed degrees about 6 times in 5 years, got about 4 years into uni, and at that stage I was like running pubs and nightclubs and things like that, and went to like the course advisor and said, I've done all these subjects, what can I graduate with as soon as possible?
Yeah, right, okay.
She pointed me in the direction of a couple of subjects. I completed those subjects, finished I think with a business and arts degree. And my first job was actually working at Suncorp, the bank.
Right, as a teller or?
No, I actually worked, it was sort of got in the back door. I was quite a handy rugby player at the time, and the Wallabies were, Australia was hosting the Rugby World Cup.
Yeah. When's that? 03, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so leading up to that, they were a major sponsor of the World Cup, and so they wanted someone in the marketing department who had a bit of they were just a graduate, but had a bit of rugby knowledge as well, so they could relate and create programs. To be honest, I didn't do a whole lot. But it was a good, good place to start your career. Then I disappeared for a while, went back into the bar scene, worked in pubs and stuff, continued to do that while I was at Suncorp. So
is that where you got permanent shoulder?
Yeah, burning the midnight oil. Like I was working, 4 or 5 nights a week at the pub, then going to the full-time job at Suncorp. And then I just almost by accident, I was just one of those blokes that wasn't going to get into a graduate program with a pretty average GPA that I had. So it was just like literally surfing Seek each day. Yeah. Got a job at Divine Homes, or Divine Limited, which was, they were a pretty massive developer back those days. It's a funny one, like I'm happy to share it now because it was so long ago, but the bloke I got interviewed by went in there, and I'd already been interviewed by like a lower ranking person in the team, and this old bloke, he'd been in the industry for a long time. He was pretty old school. I sat in front of him, and I sort of, as I said, I'd been through the process, so I thought it was like a final thing, and he's like, righto mate, who are you? And I was like, my name's Andrew, like I'm here for about this. What job? What job are you here for, mate? And I was like, the marketing and research role. And he's like, you got a CV? And I happened to have one. Like I didn't actually bring it for that. I was going to a job interview afterwards, and I happened to have one on file because like I thought they'd already seen it.
Yeah.
And he literally looked at it and he went, oh, God, you went to Ipswich Grammar, eh? And he goes, I went there, finished in 1958.
Yeah,
And he goes, "Do you play in the first 15?" I'm like, "Yeah, I did." And he goes, "That'll do me. You got the job."
yeah, right. There
And I
you
remember
go.
looking, going, "Oh, geez, I've heard
How
stories
good's
like
that?
that. Does that still happen?"
Yeah, right.
And I don't think it really did still happen, apart from just that one particular
Yeah,
bloke.
yeah.
But he was a pretty good old school mentor. He was the brains behind all the marketing back in
Yeah,
those
right.
days. And I think Divine had a different model back then. It was really, we were selling finance more than selling house and land. But certainly cut my teeth in a pretty cutthroat business. We were at the forefront of all sorts of different methods of selling house and land across the country back then. Got a deep experience across marketing operations. We were doing heaps of unit developments in Brisbane at the time. We were selling to in what we would call channel marketing now. We were right at the forefront of that. It was all new back then. We'd launch an apartment tower in Brisbane and 365 units would go the same day.
You get contracts with 10%.
Yeah,
10%
10% deposits, unconditional. Through all sorts of
The good old days.
Yeah,
eh?
yeah. And you'd turn up on settlement day and you'd have like 6 staff sitting there handing out keys.
Yeah.
And people proving settlement. It was certainly the heady days of property. And you'd launch house and we were doing land projects, and I was there right in that transition. So Divine were Divine Homes, so they were just a house builder. They started doing the apartment developments in Brisbane and Melbourne, and then they saw the light and went, we'd rather be a land developer and build a few homes, but land development's where the money is and where the growth is. So I was right there when they sort of turned that tap from Divine Homes to Divine Limited or whatever they, we fought over that brand a lot at the time. But yeah, we sort of had 1,000-lot communities down at Coomera and in all the growth areas of Melbourne. And as I said, just like the apartment's not quite the same, but you could, the price growth in projects was astronomical. You could launch projects, you were holding ballots, all sorts of things. So it was very different to what goes on in Brisbane at the moment.
Yeah. We're starting to get, I won't go there yet because we'll touch on that in a minute. So you've transitioned out of that and you're now at CFMG.
Yeah, so there's a lot in between. But I spent a few years doing that, and there was a while there at Divine where we liked to run the Melbourne operation from a sort of a Brisbane base rather than have senior people in Melbourne. So myself and a few other guys that are still in the industry, we used to basically commute down to Melbourne for weeks at a time, run the business down there. And I loved my job there. The only reason I left, my wife got pregnant with her first child, and I was like, it's not practical to be down in Melbourne 3 weeks a month with a new child. So I transitioned out of property altogether and went to work at a startup business called Budget Direct Car Insurance.
Right.
So we launched that.
Startup then, but
yeah,
now
it's big now,
well-known.
but back then, our strategy was to have about 8 different brands and spread them all through the yellow pages. So it was very different to what they do now.
It's huge.
But yeah, they were a good business. I loved it there. Couldn't have been more understanding of a first-time father needing a bit of time off and whatnot. But after a year there, or not even close to it, not quite a year, I knew I wanted to go back to property, and Divine had been ringing me saying, we'd love to come you back. Please come back. And eventually I just said, look, I'll come back if you can give me the same job I had, but based in Brisbane. They said no for about 3 months, and eventually they said yes.
Yep.
And I went back, and I loved it there. I spent another 5 years. And then they were bought out by Leighton Properties. Culture changed a bit. All the old school people sort of left, and then the big dogs like David Devine and Ken Woodley and those guys, they exited the business. So I just decided I didn't want to be there anymore either.
Yeah, right.
Spent a year at AMP, and that's where I sort of cut my teeth a little bit in the financial services. Enjoyed that. Same thing. They had a big merger with AXA, so I decided to exit, and I went and worked at Ausbuild. And I loved Ausbuild, great business. I'd happily work there. Loved my time there. I intended to go for about a year, went for nearly 2. But at the end of the day, they've got really good people there running that business. It's a family business, and if you're not one of the sons, you can only go so far, which is fine because it's not like it's nepotism. The sons are all really good operators. So you'd feel a little bit aggrieved if the sons were getting promoted ahead of you when they're not good operators. But if they're good operators, well, if it's my business and my son's a good operator, I'm going to promote him too.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
So that's who runs a business, and that's fine. So you can only go so far. And that's when I was approached by the sort of precursor to CFMG Capital to come over and help them sort out their business and get it up and going. And I've been there ever since. So that was about 8 years ago.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so it's quite a different. You're not your traditional land developer. For those watching at home, I suppose there's two sections of your business or your core business. So your first one's your opportunity fund, which is it's a unique proposition that we're introducing today to the people watching. Explain that side of business.
So there's the opportunity fund. I'll step back to like 2013 again.
Yep.
When I first started, each project was syndicated, so just traditional syndication. Every investor puts their money in; they're an equity partner in the business.
And they share a portion.
And they share all the profits.
Yeah.
So CFMG or a precursor, but CFMG Capital were a fee earner as the manager of the project, and that's it.
Yep.
So
more project management fee, revenue.
And if we met some hurdle rates, there was probably some additional management fees that we could earn.
Yep.
We completed a number of projects using that methodology.
Was that just the delivery of the project, or also the sales?
Delivery and sales. And
okay.
marketing.
Right. Yep.
So, and the main reason for me joining at the time was they traditionally sold probably 90% of their stock through the channel marketing, investment selling, builders, all the usual means that everyone, anyone that tells you they don't use those channels is lying. But, we were pretty upfront about it.
Yep.
And we just wanted to shift the balance back. And because I had experience in both in my history and I had a bit of financial service experience, it was sort of the right fit for me. We then picked up a couple of projects in Sydney that we sort of knew were going to be absolute rippers. So,
So this is 2014?
2014, about that. Yep. So openly admitting, we looked at it and went, if we syndicate these, we're going to leave a lot of money on the table.
Yep.
We've identified them, we've acquired them. If we syndicate and just earn a fee, we're not acting in the best interest of the business, I suppose. So we offered what we thought was a fair and reasonable fixed rate of return. The first one we offered 10% per annum to investors, and then the second one we offered 20. And on both projects we delivered that with ease. We made a hell of a lot of money on top of that. But the interesting feedback from investors was, while some of them had been part of the syndicate, some of them hadn't, they really liked that sort of set rate of return. Obviously there's risk involved, so not going to sit here and go through disclaimers, but fixed return doesn't mean guaranteed, all that sort of stuff. But we offered those returns, targeted returns. We delivered them. We kept the difference.
Yep.
And so twofold is, one, your interests are aligned because once we've delivered their returns, we're trying to keep everything after that. So the higher it gets above 10 or 20 or whatever it was at the time, that's money in the pocket of the business, while we were earning a fee along the way. So that was a precursor to the Land Opportunity Fund. We thought, if investors like that targeted return, as opposed to, here's a FISO, it might make 28%, but it could end up 15. You're going up and down as the project goes up and down. That targeted return, knowing that our interests are aligned, because once we've hit the targeted return, we're keeping everything after that.
I suppose that would align for me as well with maybe not as such a sophisticated investor too, maybe like a mum and dad who has a bit of money lying in their super or something like that, where they don't want to have to think too much, but they just work off a ballpark of 10%.
You're exactly right. So about one of the key points for us is there's a lot of people playing, I guess, in this space, but not so many are open to retail investors. So you don't have to be a sophisticated investor. We set the minimum ourselves, so our license allows us to take less, but we set the minimum of 25,000.
Okay, yep.
But beyond that, there's no, you don't have to have $3 million net wealth and all the stuff that you do have to be sophisticated with, like you do with other type products like this. So we started doing that model, and we've gone from strength to strength. So we've never missed that return in the time that we've been operating it. We've completed upwards of 10 projects. We've got about 8 going at the moment. And every project's different in the way we raise the money. Sometimes, we take all the risk and we purchase the site outright with cash on hand ourselves and then refinance ourselves out because we need a short turnaround time on the transaction. Sometimes we might option up a property and have time to settle. So we'll raise capital through our capital raising channels in order to settle the site. And that's all done. So the capital raising is done. We have a supplementary PDS, which is specific to each project, outlines all the risks, all the things that are going on in the project, all the fees. And then we also have a master PDS, which is the product disclosure statement for the Land Opportunity Fund. So it's like a master trust, and then everyone invests through that into a sub-trust that's specific to that project. So it's a unique product, we think, particularly being open to retail investors.
Yep.
And it's just an opportunity for people, I guess, that rather than, obviously there's different strategies to build your wealth.
Yeah.
Rather than going and acquiring yet another investment property, taking up some additional debt, things like that, you can invest into our fund and gain exposure to the residential property market via a different method, essentially via a debt instrument, and then your returns are determined by our ability as a project manager and how the property market's performing.
And is that the minimum amount is 25,000?
Yeah.
And versus buying, if you want to go into property, you spend $500,000
Yeah,
trying to get an investment. It's just like if you don't have as much or you don't want that much risk, you can start off by 25 plus.
Yep, exactly. So
It's a
if
good
you want to
option.
buy an investment property, you might need 50 grand deposit,
Yeah,
and you might need to borrow 450,000.
Yeah.
yeah,
In this, you're not investing directly in. It's not direct property investment. You're
Yep.
investing into a fund that's exposed to
Yep.
residential property.
yeah.
But you only need 25, and you don't need to take on any debt. You're essentially lending money yourself. You're a lender.
Yeah, that's great.
We put that capital to work as part of our, capital matrix. We still take a first mortgage, so it's not secured by a first mortgage. So we take a first mortgage with all the big banks. So we've got a good track record, so we're supported by the major banks. So every single project we currently do, we have the construction facility with a major bank at the rates that are available, which is a hell of a lot less than our 12% offering,
Yep.
and less than the private market, of course. We operate those projects like a normal developer, and then that 12% goes back to the investors, and then we keep everything after that.
Yeah,
Yep.
right. And so will you use 100% of that, capital raising to fund the project, or is it like you'll partner in and put
So
you guys will put
no,
your
we
own-
don't raise 100%.
Yeah.
No, so as I said, every deal's different.
Yeah.
Sometimes we need it quickly, so we raise whatever we can,
Yeah.
settle with the rest of our money.
Yeah.
Others we have a little bit longer, so it's a greater percentage of the money needed. But at no point in time have we ever raised 100% of the funds to settle aside. It's always up to 50% at most. Yeah.
And that, I suppose, what that does as well, having that I suppose it's a finance instrument for yourselves,
Yeah.
isn't it? It allows you to have, I suppose, opportunity or never miss opportunities. Because if you're tying up your own money consistently, then good opportunities come down the track. You may not have the ability to
Exactly.
purchase or settle those
Exactly.
opportunities. So if you
Yeah.
can jump when you need to jump, that's
Yeah, I mean, early days when we hadn't built up our capabilities and our track record, and we were raising money and we didn't know how fast, we didn't have any sort of data to say, okay, we can raise this much money in this amount of time,
Yep.
so we could commit to a site. As we built that track record, so we've got a really loyal investor base, like 91% of them reinvest every
I
time
was
we
going to
put
say,
out an offer.
if you haven't not delivered yet, for me, if I'm
Yeah.
putting in 25 or 100 grand and I've done it 4 times and I always get my money back,
Yeah.
then it makes sense to keep
Exactly.
going, right?
So if we keep delivering, they'll keep reinvesting.
Yeah.
Some people drop out for different reasons. We've had young people invest 3 or 4 times just to supercharge their deposit, and then they go
Deposit,
and buy
yeah.
their first home. We've also got older people that are nearing retirement and they're looking for a more annuity style product, so they want a monthly income. One key point of our product is it's all paid on maturity.
Yep.
And that's pretty obvious why. There's no profit in a development
Yeah, that's
until
right.
you've completed it and settled the blocks.
Plenty of losses though.
Yeah. So if anyone's offering a monthly return on
Yeah.
a development, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah,
to me.
how-
Scratch your
So-
head, yeah. You're probably just getting paid back a portion of the money that
yeah,
you put
exactly.
in.
they've just raised it more than they need.
Needed,
They
yeah.
use some of it to pay you back.
Yeah, that's right.
There's other words for that, but
Pyramid scheme.
yeah. So with ours, it's all paid on maturity. So
Yeah.
using a really simple example, if you put 100 grand in, it's a 3-year project. You just get 136 back. It's not compounding, provided that obviously all the different risks and
Yeah.
and issues that go on. But if everything goes according to plan, put 100 in, you get 136 back in 3 years. At the time, we may have a project open, we may not. They might choose to put 36 back in, 100 back in, 136, whatever it is. But 91% of them reinvest. And we sort of know now when we put something in market how quickly and how much we can raise. So we can make commitments or make plans based on that history, whereas before we was a bit of flying blind, and we found certainly early in the piece, there was money coming from within the business to settle sites because we hadn't raised money quick enough. That problem's gone away. But also I think this product and this business, it has a life cycle. It's probably another 10 years at least. But if we keep doing this over and over again, and we keep delivering 12% and we keep keeping everything after that, hopefully that nest egg, that amount after 12% gets big enough that we can just do stuff ourselves. And we no longer need investors. That time may come in 10 years, 5 years, who knows? But 12% is a fair whack to be paying people. But
without having to put any
it's
work in
realistic
either,
and conservative. But if we don't want to pay, if we don't have to pay it, well, we're not going to raise capital. Like if you don't need it, so hopefully we'll build up a big enough capital stack to no longer do it. But
and he's obviously had
many of my investors are listening. That's not happening anytime soon.
And but I suppose that's in itself, even though people may be thinking, look, you're going to move away from that model, but that's business acumen, isn't it? That you got to look after the best interests of the business. In turn, that's the best interests of your investors that are currently in. So from that standpoint, your investors in CFMG, they're no different to the investors who are putting 25 grand in. You've got to look after those investors, in whatever way they come.
Absolutely. And a lot of developers out there that we either compete with or know or work with or whatever, there's other methods of raising capital. We have our own AFSL. They're probably borrowing in the private market, pref equity at 20%, like the amount of mezz money out there. So we basically have found our own source of mezzanine finance at 12% instead of 20. So it's more attractive when you compare it to other products out there for us than it is to do what I guess what everyone else is doing. So we're just trying to find our unique place in the market. At the end of the day, once we've bought a site, funded it, we operate like any other developer in terms of.
And it's obviously working because the volume of sites and developments that you've been able to produce on. I think you said you've got 8 on the ground at the moment. Across the eastern seaboard. So we're not in Sydney anymore. We haven't actively pulled out of Sydney, but we just haven't found a site that suits the model. For probably 3 years now, but we've got 2 in Melbourne, one sort of just starting off, which is probably not ideal timing, but and one just coming to the end. So it's we've done 6 stages out of 7 in that one. The other one's only a small 80 lotter, thank God. But the other one's a 300 plus lotter, and we've got about 30 left. And then we've got 6 in Brisbane with more coming. And we're always working on new sites. So internally, what are the discussions, just quickly on that 80 lot subdivision in Melbourne that you're having? Because obviously down there they're feeling the effects of C19, dramatically more than anywhere else in Australia right now. So from a developer standpoint, and your investors, I suppose, if you're guaranteeing, or not guaranteeing, but if there's a fixed return of say 12%, and that construction in Victoria is not allowed to go ahead at the moment unless you're already underway. So does that then, the longer that time frame drags out, does that then mean that 12% per annum, that if it takes another 2 years, that's additional? It's prorated, so so not quite that, doesn't quite work like that. But if we put something out with like a 2-year offer, generally that means it's 1 to 3. Because if we finish early, we'll pay you early. We don't want to keep paying 12% if we don't have to. So if we finish early, we'll pay out early. So you'll have your shares redeemed, your units redeemed, and your capital and your dividends paid. But if we go a little bit longer, equally you continue to earn at that rate, but it's a maximum of 12 months. What happens after that 12 months? It's never happened, so we haven't come to that. Imagine we'd call some kind of meeting with investors and see what they want to vote on and where the project's sitted. In that particular Melbourne 80 lotter, luckily it's got a really strong feasibility. It's got a commercial retail site attached to it that the fund or the project owns that isn't really built into the feasibility, but that can be sold off. So that's almost by accident, not by design, but it's a good one to have that on.
And look, the market down there, until this second wave hit, it was relatively unaffected.
Yeah.
We found we were doing better down there than up here, and up here was going pretty well. The only quiet month, and I'm sure you guys felt the same, was probably April. March was a huge month. I think a lot of people were just trying to get in before the
make the decision.
potential lockdown.
Yeah.
So that probably brought some transactions forward. April was definitely quieter, and then after that, it was solid without being spectacular. And then when the $25,000 grant got announced,
adrenaline in the leg, and you're good.
Yeah, I mean, and that was for us really. We were well placed again by luck, not design.
Yeah.
We had heaps of titled stock in the affordable markets that grant suits.
Oh yeah, and you look at like some of those areas you're in, the Ormos and the Logan Reserves and those sort of pockets. It's just the first home buyer havens. That's the affordability to 400 to 500, and that's where 90% of the purchases in today's market are sitting. The investment market, I don't think from us what we're experiencing is back in its full force yet. But I tell you what, the first home buyer space, or the owner occupier space, is definitely made up for that.
I mean, we've got waiting lists at some
Correct.
projects.
Yeah,
So I haven't seen that in Queensland. Certainly in Melbourne in that 15, 16, 17 period, it got really hot. There was projects around it. We never quite got to the ballot, but prices were going up every weekend. But they were, literally drawing lotto balls out of a thing at some projects near us. But in our Ormo project, we could sell that 4 times over. I'd love to find some more land in Ormo.
Yeah,
perfect timing. There's
and
nothing
then Park
else.
Ridge and Logan Reserve, we were really well placed. That we've got 3 active projects in that space. We had nearly 80 to 100 titled blocks when that got announced. So we were basically primed and ready to take advantage of the fact that the grant's ready. You need to be able to start, when it was announced, they might make some changes, but when it was announced, you needed to be able to have your land settled and start construction sort of by March next year. So if you're a developer and you've just started turning dirt, you're like, am I going to get my land ready?
Yeah.
Whereas with us, we had land ready to go.
Yeah.
So
And did you stop construction on new stages when COVID hit, or you just kept powering forward? Because I was gonna say that's probably one of the benefits of your finance structure is the fact that you're not looking for coins down the side of your armchair.
Yeah, we're still, our construction finance is still through the bank like any other developer, but we consciously sat down at an executive level in the business in March when COVID hit, and there were some developers that were sucking people left, right and centre, closing things up. We consciously tried to operate as safely as we could, but business as normal. So we hired probably 6 people into the business between March and May. I don't think anyone else was hiring people. Most people were firing people. And we didn't actively pursue it, but that also meant while we're in that hiring spree, which we'd always planned and we decided to continue with it, the available talent that was in the market for a job was phenomenal compared to what was there only 2 months ago.
Yeah.
So we hired one executive level role and it was a newly created role. We hired another pretty senior role, again newly created, replaced an executive role because someone had left. And then we took all our sales in-house. So we used to use project marketing agents like your Colliers, your Red 23, doing a great job. It wasn't a results-based decision. It was just a cost-based decision, which we'd planned prior to COVID hitting or even existing. And we transitioned into employing salespeople directly. And we did all that right in the middle of COVID, and we just proceeded with it. And I think we're reaping the benefits now. If you go into hibernation, you're admitting defeat.
You're raising the white flag,
Whereas we just decided, no, we're going to push through. We had a really, really great March. As I said, April was a little bit slow, and everything's been good since.
And so now on the back of the home builder, I mean, I'm sure you're the same, but it's just hard to get land. I mean, I was saying it a couple of times. It's phenomenal, and it's a massive confidence booster too to I think anyone watching there about the strength of the residential property market in Australia, with the fact that technically we're in a recession, but I've never seen a market this hot. It defies odds. It doesn't technically make sense.
I've certainly seen markets hotter, but I've been probably around a bit longer. But it's a good shot in the arm. And I hope it continues right through to next year. But I mean, we're seeing we're not seeing out of this world numbers, but we're just seeing really solid above average numbers, budgets being met when everyone else is, talking about a recession. But at the end of the day, as I said to you before we started, pretty much like the GFC, if you're in secure employment and you've maintained your job and you're relatively unaffected, and that's really unfortunate the way COVID's worked, is that, it's just pure luck.
Like you said, you could be a $1 million pilot.
You could be a $500,000, $1 million pilot, and suddenly you're making nothing. And you could have been a hand sanitizer manufacturer and you're making killing and all this.
Toilet paper.
They're obviously extreme examples, but there's heaps of industries completely unaffected, heaps of industries unaffected. There's been no rhyme or reason, or it hasn't. There's been no prejudice in that. It's just how it's worked. But if you're lucky enough to have remained in secure employment and you know that you're securely employed, well, there's record cash giveaways from all levels of government. There's interest rates at all-time lows. There's offers coming from developers. There's offers coming from builders. There's never been a better time to take that step into the property market, or take a second step or a third step, or whatever it is you're doing. The Reno one, I don't think probably was planned that well.
No.
But we don't mind that. We're not,
that's
we're not
right,
in business renovating houses.
We don't do renos,
I think if you're doing 150,000 reno, you're probably earning more than 200 grand.
Yeah, that's right.
But there's probably very few that can get hold of that grant via that means, or qualify for that. But the 25 grand home builder grant, it's a great shot in the arm.
Yeah.
Certainly in Victoria and in Queensland, it's probably hard to get a house and land package in Greater Sydney for less than $750.
Yeah, that's right.
Again, we're not operating there, so I don't mind.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
If sales continue the way they're going on your estates in southeast Queensland, are you going to bring releases, not staged more forward, but will you release stages earlier? Will you change deposit terms slightly? Have you guys met about that at all?
Yeah, look, we're just trying to. We're always trying to do it, but we're trying to do it at a greater rate now and trying to bring construction forward. So we want people to know that the land that they're potentially committing to is going to actually
happen.
They need certainty that, and I think that's why there might be some changes to the grant, because you're almost in the hands of some councils, unfortunately.
I also heard that some developers that stopped construction through COVID, that now they're engaging civil companies to go back on site, and they're saying, sorry, we can't get there for 6 to 12 months.
Which could be true, and that luckily doesn't affect us.
It doesn't. You haven't stopped.
We just push through, and we're trying to bring sites, so additional stages forward. And luckily they're just rolling from one stage to the next, so we don't need to remobilise. But certainly, if you put a stop to it, you've made your bed. You should sleep in it.
And the civil guys have moved somewhere else. We don't have the resources to do that.
Well, we've got a site in Rochedale that we started construction on in mid-May.
Yeah, that's
only a little 15 lotter.
Yeah,
we had it finished less than a month later.
Yeah, right.
Because they obviously had so many teams available. Our civils just put everyone on there. I've never seen anything get built so quick in my life. I was like, Jesus.
If you've got everyone on the
Rochedale,
books.
interesting story.
Yeah,
it's phenomenal. Like the result. That's
what people will pay to live in Rochedale astounds me. When we were looking at the FISO for that project, we've got a project in Bridgeman Downs on the north side, and I was looking at the values, and my acquisition manager came to me and said, I've applied these retail values to the completed blocks, and I'm like, mate, that's too high. That's too high. And I'm always careful to look at my own views rather than what the market thinks, and I'm like, I'd rather live in Bridgeman Downs.
Yeah.
And Rochedale's, significantly dearer.
Yeah.
So and he goes, oh no, that's what it should be. And I thought, okay, I went off and did my research. I'm like, no, you're right, mate. It's probably too low.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
you've been conservative.
And they would have sold straight away because there's nothing really available at the moment.
There's not a lot out there, and it's a hotly demanded market. And our product in that particular location, it's set back from the road. It's quite a nice little private enclave. So I wish I could find a few more little 15 lotters like that.
And it hasn't
out quickly.
And it hasn't stopped in there. I remember, 4 or 5 years ago, we were doing some terrace home product for Sandsky.
Yeah. And
great product. And it was, it was looking back at the time, we're thinking, this is pushing the boundaries in terms of, value for money. But they were, I think they were $499 terrace homes. And, on their own standalone, blocks of land, and now those same sort of product, you know, you're at what, $1,500 a square metre for a block of land there.
I think the later stages we were selling them for $600, $599.
I was working at Ausbuild when the first display village for the Roachdale Estates came on, probably about 2011 maybe.
Yep.
And we built 4 displays in that particular first village, and a couple, you know, obviously like every builder, they sell their displays, and I looked at buying one of them, just you know, there was a reasonable deal going for a staff member, and it was nice. It was an Alara, which was, I used to think that was a nice plan on their range. I think I could have bought it. It was on like a 600 and something square metre block. Had a nice, you know, display spec home. I think I could have bought it for like $799,000 or something with a 6% lease back. Well, that thing would be worth 1.3.
That's right. It just keeps going.
And I would have earned 6% in the first 3 years after I bought it. But I drive through Roachdale now and just these massive high spec 2-story homes. Just
and they're starting to get into the next phase of I suppose the suburb cycle. Like they're starting into medium into higher density, the unit and apartment blocks. We've got another friend of ours who's got apartments now starting to come into Roachdale as well. You know, so. It's starting to transition through to different product types as well.
Yeah, people call it South Side, but I call myself West Side, like in the inner west of Brisbane. And we did some vendor visits, you know, for potential site acquisitions, and this stuff's probably a few years away for servicing. And I was looking at it going, you know, you could buy this for $2 million right now. When the services come to the door, it's worth $2.5, $3 million.
Yeah.
In today's market, so in 2 years' time, it's probably worth more. It's 2 acres, got a pool, tennis court. I'd love to live here. This is great. Knowing my wife wouldn't go, but I was just like, geez, I could buy this and get development upside. So, you know, it's fantastic. But you know, everyone's got their pockets they prefer to live in. But if you're moving to Brisbane from another state, you know, I don't think you go wrong living in that inner north or inner south, like Roachdale or Brisbane Downs.
Well, because it's, you know, for us as Queenslanders, we have the mentality that anything over 5 or 10 minute drive, it's, you know, I don't know if I really want to push myself. You know, I'm exhausted.
Yeah, exactly.
But they're used to travelling from, you know, CBD to Parramatta or wherever, Penrith on a train.
But I mean, at Roachdale, because you've got access to that gateway, you can get the sunny coast, the north,
really
the
quickly.
Gold Coast. You can go even into the city in peak hour. I've never tried it in peak hour, but like if I go to visit our site there, I'm back in the office within sort of 15, 20 minutes during the day. So, you know, even if it's half an hour in the morning, that's okay. And you can get to the airport 10 minutes. Like it's a pretty good spot. And also you've got access to the Bayside that a lot of people in Brisbane forget the Bayside even exists.
Well, when you live out there, you don't stick to your own.
I having worked at Ausbuild, like Bayside to me is like, you know, they think they're not part of Brisbane. It's a completely different part of Queensland.
That's right.
And there's a couple of builders that just stick to that area and
kill it
really well.
Yeah, Fatini Homes.
Yeah.
Have you looked at Polara's sites in there?
Yeah, we've had a look. It's being aggressively acquired by a few other people. So
I think Ausbuild's the biggest.
Yeah, they're going really well. Like I know their acquisition manager well, so having worked with him and still mates with him. But we're probably a lot more conservative too than most because, you know, we are utilising other people's money. Our feasibility's, you know, probably a little bit more conservative than the average feasibility, the way we assess sites. And certainly like a builder developer like those guys, you know, they obviously can probably afford to pay a little bit more because they're making margin out of their build. Which is, you know, a great model. But then, you know, they've also got the challenge if they buy a site that's too big, they don't want to do 100% build out.
Which is they're starting to do now.
Sell land only. Which was, you know, a discussion when I was there. I don't want to talk out of school too much, but certainly it was an ongoing discussion. How much land should we sell without an Ausbuild house on it? But, you know, they're an awesome business, and they'll find that balance, which I'm sure they've already got. But
and so you touched on like the conservative approach. I think that's really important for particularly your opportunity fund, because people, there's the gimmicks, the smokes and mirrors, the bullshit that a lot of people get tangled up in, the outrageous, you know, double your money in 3 months and that sort of stuff. Tell us about there's obviously, you know, ASIC and these governing bodies that hold people like yourselves accountable to make sure that the good eggs like yourselves and what you're doing, you know, I suppose you weed out all the, you know, the shit, I suppose.
Yeah. Oh, look, because we have our own AFSL, we issue a PDS and a supplementary PDS, and I guess your compliance obligations are really important, and making sure your staff stick to it, because when you're incentivising staff to raise money, you've got to make sure that they're not saying the wrong thing and all that sort of stuff. So at the end of the day, no one can invest with us without being given the PDS and make sure they read it. Like, you can tell someone 25 times to read it and you'll never know whether they did, but they've got to tick a box saying, I've read the PDS. They've got to fill out an application form that was part of the PDS. And we make a point at every time, you know, pages, I know the page numbers off by heart. Pages 11 to 13 outline the risk in this investment. Please make sure you've read them. You can only do so much.
PDS, for anyone watching, is a product disclosure statement.
So, you know, if you're investing with what I would call high net worth or sophisticated, and you're not issuing, you know, you're an unlicensed operator. Just because you're unlicensed doesn't mean you're doing the wrong thing. But your compliance obligations are lower. You only have to issue an information memorandum. That doesn't get checked off by lawyers or anyone like that. So when we issue a supplementary PDS for each project, it goes off to a law firm and an independent law firm. They make sure that we can stand behind every statement we make. We have to create a file that states, you know, that this is where the information for every, it's this massive pile of documents that supports every single statement we make. We have to have an independent valuation done on the site acquisition, and one of our key rules is that the valuation is equal to or greater than what our purchase price is. Which is one of the hardest things to do, because getting valuers to value things up is pretty hard work. But and that's, you know, if we were operating with our own funds, we'd say you get a val just for your own due diligence. But if the val comes in a bit short, you probably go, well, I don't agree with that bloke. Go ahead. But with us, we'd be like, well, we can't do that now.
They can't do it. And so then do you go back to your vendor or your site and be like, look, mate, I can't do it unless you're going to drop, you know.
Essentially, that becomes crunch time. You go to the vendor and say, this is the valuation we've been given. If you can't match that price, we're out. And we've had that several times. We've also had people agree to it. But you know, if you're a Joe Blow vendor that wasn't even a seller, and someone's knocked on your door and said, I want to turn you into a millionaire and buy your site, you're obviously skeptical from day one. And they offer you $6 million, and then right at crunch time, they come back and say, oh, sorry, the valuer, who they don't know how the industry works, goes, oh, the valuer said it's only worth 5.5. They go, yeah, right, mate, sure they did.
That's
and like we supply them, but you know, it just comes down to
they think you work together or something.
They just look at, you know, depending on their level of expertise and how they've educated themselves about the market, they might just tell us to piss off right there and then. Some of them will get a copy of the valuation, ring the valuer, ring another valuation firm, even commission their own val, which will cost them $10,000. And that's happened. And then they'll say, oh, well, we've gone off to a different firm and commissioned our own val and came back with a similar number. So, yeah, we will reduce our price. Others just say, I didn't want to sell in the first place. See you later.
I don't need to, I'll hold.
I mean, these, you know, our project at Park Ridge is an interesting one. Like, we bought that off a guy. He was a 90-something-year-old German guy. He fought in the World War on the German side in World War II. Lovely old man. He's a pilot. Interesting life. He didn't want to go, but he was all alone. His wife had died 5 years ago. And even now I go and, because he's just a funny bloke. Like, I just love talking to him. So I go and visit him, you know, once a month.
Oh, that's nice.
Because part of the process was we'll find. He's like, where am I going to live if I sell this? So we'll help you, you know, find a place if you need help. So he's bought like a little townhouse that he lives out in Cleveland. Go and visit him. I was like, he's whinging about this and that. And I said, mate, you've got $10 million in the bank. Just go and get it fixed. Like, I said, I can't believe you bought this little townhouse. You know.
I was about to say that. He bought a townhouse. And
I'm like, I don't know what, you know, debt free with $10 million and you're 96. Good luck spending that.
Could have bought a penthouse and lived out a couple of years in the city.
But I love going and visiting him and chatting to him. But I think he's a guy now, if he had his time again, he wouldn't have sold.
Oh, really?
Even though we did all the right things and we visited him, I think he would have liked to have just lived out his days on his land.
You tell him there's a 400 square metre block left at the corner.
Well, incredibly, he's like 96 now. He actually gets in his car and drives over there.
Yeah, right.
Haven't visited him lately because probably not wise to visit a 96-year-old in current circumstances. But that's what I would call a typical vendor, like someone that he doesn't care if he's got the money.
I got a lot of the time, especially some of these areas, whereby it's now on the edge of the urban footprint or the urban development side of things, and traditionally they're considered miles away from town, but town's coming to them very very quickly. So you got some of these properties have been in families for generations and generations and generations.
He built the house on that property with his own bare hands.
Yeah,
in the
that's
50s.
right. It's hard to give away something like that, Like it's
Yeah.
hard to part with so much history and so much of your bloodline almost in between the four walls.
Yeah, no, he's and there's a site across the road from that. I'm sure I'm not telling any secrets here. There's developers that all know about it. The guy's like third generation. He's like 60 years old, and he's it's worth $25 million. He's not going anywhere.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And you can talk to him as much as you like, but he's not going to sell.
Mm.
And he probably has children as well. I want
No kids. That's the thing.
No?
Like these guys, like same with the other bloke. They got no one to hand it down to.
Right.
So who knows what'll happen to it? But
Well, I think Min Nippy, that development, he waited till he passed away. And then the estate went to them and they said, okay, we're going to sell it off as long as you put a golf course in the development. I think that's what BMD did in Cannon Hill. But he just like, I'm just going to wait.
yeah.
Okay, no problem.
I suppose when you're 96, how do you spend $10 million?
Yeah, exactly. We're not on a townhouse and
that's
whinge about
right.
the TV size. I'm like, go down to JB Hi-Fi, buy the biggest one you want, because like he's got like a flight simulator.
Right.
That's his number one hobby. I said, mate, don't play around with this junk.
Buy a
Go
plane.
I said, mate, go and order the best technology money can buy.
Yeah.
Get someone to come and install it, and you could have 10 bloody 40-inch screens surrounding you.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not a bad idea, Tom.
Mate, talk to me about the acquisition process in finding a site, because obviously delivering a project and constructing it and putting blocks of land and turning something, like a farm or whatever into residential lots is one thing, but choosing a location that's desirable and it's marketable and that's going to sell is obviously whereby the profits are realised and the development comes to fruition.
Well, you're absolutely right. The money's made at acquisition stage. So there's several methods that we would utilise, and I don't think I'm telling any secrets. Obviously, you do your own mapping, your own research on where you'd like to develop, and for us, there's areas that we love, but you don't want to get too much saturation as well. So we try and have all points of the compass, at least in Brisbane. We're not there in the west at the moment. And then there's door knocking, like literally just writing like we probably send 100 letters a week. The ones that we think are really good sites, you might visit them over and over again, build rapport, all sorts of things. Our acquisitions guy's a young fella. He's really good with his research and stuff. But if we're at a point where we're dealing with a vendor that's a bit old school, and that's where I'd say, look, mate, once you've identified that they might sell, and that'll let me come and get involved. Not that I'm the vendor whisperer or anything like that, but I think dealing with a 23-year-old versus someone in their late 30s like myself. They're going to feel more comfortable having that conversation. So, we change our methodology depending on the potential site. And then also, there's the easy way where Colliers or Jones Lang LaSalle just puts an ad in the paper and says this site's for sale, and whoever pays the most gets it.
Yeah. And I suppose on top of that as well, you're looking at areas that have got the standard fundamentals of I mean, investing in property, I'd assume anyway from my mindset would be a similar process for acquisition, albeit not the actual negotiation side of things, but looking for transport, looking for retail, because that's what ultimately people are going to want, much like your tenants are when you buy an investment property, something that's centrally located to amenity of
and
magnitude.
Particularly if you what I'd call like I call it the mortgage belt market. So that affordable market, first home buyer market. Those areas often won't have the infrastructure. It's just got to be planned. So you got to make sure it's planned, and it's not just possible. Like I always tell the joke when we were selling Coomera back in about 2002, I think it was, whenever we launched it. We were talking about the Coomera Town Centre coming in 18 months, and I think I came back to started working at CFMG and was selling a project at Ormo. And we're still talking about in 2013, Coomera Town Centre's 18 months away. It finally came.
That's right. Now there's I think Costco just put a DA at Costco, a DA at the Coomera.
So it did eventually come, but if you bought it in 2002 expecting it there in 2004, you'd wait another 11 years.
Yeah, that's right.
So, you've got to make sure that it's infrastructure that's in the books. So you rely on the government infrastructure more than the private enterprise. Even at Park Ridge, when we and Logan Reserve, we bought a couple of sites there, and there's a Plan Woolies on Chambers Flat Road there that was meant to be done a year ago, and it's not done.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like it's coming anytime soon, but luckily Park Ridge Town Centre is already there, already been developed.
Big transit centre and all that sort of
added
stuff.
300 car parks. They've got both Woolies and Coles. Once you've got both big brands in a shopping centre, it's going to become a destination shopping centre. So we didn't rely on that one, luckily.
Yeah.
But that's a good example. Coomera Town Centre, that one, those ones that people are talking about are coming and just never come, or they come 15 years later. You really were to rely on those government projects, road widenings, road upgrades, transport hubs, bus exchanges if you're not on the train line, and then just good old-fashioned CBD proximity or employment hub proximity. Because I think one of the big drivers in that Logan Park Ridge area is not so much all those transport hubs, is that Yatala Employment Centre.
Yep.
Not a lot of people would equate the two, but they're actually not that far apart. I don't imagine, I've never actually done the numbers, but I don't think a huge percentage of people in Park Ridge are commuting to the CBD.
I wouldn't,
They're working in different employment hubs.
Yeah.
So we're really careful about that in our marketing as well. Like, we've got a project in Melbourne, and we were just discussing it a couple of weeks ago where, someone put together a video and said proximity to Melbourne CBD, and I'm like, someone that lives there, doesn't matter. They're never going there. What's proximity to something that matters to people living there?
Yeah.
So we're like, proximity to this shopping
Point Cook,
centre, and proximity to that school and that employment hub, because hardly anyone living in that location is commuting to the CBD every day. And if they were, they'd go and live on a train line. If basically my view on property in general is, if you're commuting to CBD, you probably want to be on a train line. If you're commuting to a different employment hub, you're happy to buy away from a train line. It's the only proven way to get into town quickly is a train. There's no way I'd be wanting to drive, 45k through peak hour traffic.
It's going to get worse.
Yeah, so, I see it now, like, I live in the western suburbs of Brisbane or inner west, but my children go to school out at Ipswich. If I drive them, if they got sport before school, and then I've got to drive back from Ipswich, if I leave, if they've got swimming or athletics training, it's quite early, so it's good. So I'm out at the school, drop them off, I'm on the road back to Brisbane by 6:30. If I sit there and get a coffee and wait till 6:45 or 7, takes me an hour and a half. Yeah. Whereas if I leave by 6:30 from one of their schools, 30 minutes all the way to the Fortitude Valley.
Yeah.
And that 15-minute gap makes a 45-minute difference.
Yeah, that's right.
Whereas you just jump on the train, you're there in half an hour no matter what. Yeah.
And mate, so what's your take on what's to come in such an unprecedented time? There's no map, there's no chart plotter, but how do you think, depending on who you speak to or what media you pick up, there's either people saying Australian property market continues to defy the odds, or there's people saying, watch out, the arse is going to fall out of it. Where do you think it's going?
I think there's some. One massive variable is what happens with second, third, and fourth wave.
Yeah.
But let's hope Queensland doesn't experience a second wave. Hopefully there's a vaccine in the next 6 to 12 months.
Yeah.
But putting aside that, if we're through the worst of it, I think the property market will, and as Queensland has, like in my time in the last 10 years, I look at Queensland, it's just this nice linear line of growth. Whereas you watch Melbourne and Sydney and they go up and then they flatten and they go up, and they have these massive growth periods that are unsustainable. Whereas Queensland's just followed this nice like linear path.
6%.
Yeah. We haven't got projects where I'm sitting down reviewing prices every weekend.
Yeah.
Like when the Melbourne market was really hot, like we'd go, okay, let's price the next stage, then think to what we think is acceptable, then add 15 grand to that, then put it on the market, and then you'd put it out on the market and 75 blocks would sell on the weekend, and you go, oh, I got that wrong.
Yeah, right.
We haven't had that in Brisbane.
Yeah.
Haven't had that Brisbane for 15 years,
Yeah.
longer. But particularly because the Brisbane market is, well, it's got everything going for it at the moment, is one, where we haven't got that second wave. we're not reliable. We're not reliant on international migration. Most international migrants settle in Sydney and Melbourne.
Yeah.
Our migration that drives our market is interstate migration.
Domestic. It's even happening more so now. From
which I think will, if not continue, it'll actually boom.
Yeah.
There's a fair bit of work to go with the Queensland government and creating some jobs to sustain that. But if there's a bit of a transition to that work from home model, which I don't necessarily think will be the case, but a lot of commentators are saying it will, people that work in a desk job in Melbourne might be able to do that from home in Brisbane. And what buys you a house and land package let's not talk just house and land packages. What buys you residential real estate 15 k's out from from Melbourne? If you sell that house right now and move to Queensland, you're getting twice the house for half the money.
That's right. You're on the water.
Yeah. Kids at my families of kids at my school. It's like I decided to up and leave my job in Sydney because it's a small business and I can operate it from anywhere.
Yeah.
Now I can live in a blue chick suburb on the river with a tennis court. When I was living in a 3-bedroom bungalow in in Drummoyne.
Yeah.
So
They still got houses like
and have money left over.
Yeah, that's right.
I think here in Gold Coast you can get them for like even some under $1 million or $1 million on the water, and people go, "Is that even real?" Like, yeah, go have a look.
Yeah,
it's so cheap.
Yeah, I mean, you can even in blue chip. I'm talking, absolute blue chip Brisbane suburbs. You can buy a genuine 5-bedroom expansive home on 1,000 square metres for less than $2 million. If you wanted that same house in Glen Iris or Toorak, $15 million.
Right.
And in Sydney, I wouldn't even know.
Yeah, that's right.
Numbers that go beyond my comprehension. I don't even think that product. Like when we launched our Lamandra Park Bridgeman Downs project. Just for investors, so like through the Land Opportunity Fund, some of our investors are Sydney based, like, oh, geez, got some nice 500, 600, 700 square metre blocks, 12 Ks from the Brisbane CBD. Oh, what are they going to sell for? Like 1.2, 1.3 million? I'm like, no, 400 grand, 500 grand. They're like, what do you mean? And I said, that's what it's worth. And they said, what do you think that a new project like that would go for in Sydney? And I said, well, one, it doesn't exist.
Yeah, that's right.
So there is no undeveloped land, 12 Ks from the Sydney CBD. But if it existed, I couldn't even tell you. $3 million for a
even look at Melbourne, like Yarra Bend, the big Glenville project. Like the pricing coming out of there is phenomenal. Like they're astronomical pricing.
And that's just that's they're cities with $5 million plus people.
Yeah.
And we're a little old Brisbane that's still a big country town.
Yeah,
so.
And it's growing. Yeah, like you said, more and more people are moving here now. It's
I think it's a long way away, but we'll potentially one day be a bloody metropolis that goes from the Gold Coast to Noosa.
Yeah, that's right.
And everything in between will be developed.
And it's starting to change, like even the culture. Like I've noticed since I've been living and working as an adult, but the cafes, the ripped jeans and the top knots and the barber shops and all that sort of stuff starting to come in where it was literally Frank, the barber, and it was just, rough.
I'm still pretty old school, but you're right. Like I go down to the cheapest barber I can find in Chinatown in the Valley for $12. But I got young blokes in my office. They come back and they get given a beer with their haircut. They pay like $65, and they go, "Oh yeah, but you get a beer." I said, "Mate,
you get a carton.
That's a $55 beer you just paid for your $12 haircut."
Yeah, that's right.
But they're all prepared to pay that, and like I'm a Victorian originally. I came up here as a teenager, but if I had my way, I'd live in Melbourne. But that's more for the footy and the golf and the sporting precincts. But the culture in Brisbane's catching up for sure.
Yep.
But it still does have that country town feel. Shops still shut at 9 o'clock, and the supermarket shut at 9 o'clock. If you tell someone that in Melbourne, they're like, "What? Like they're open 24 hours? What are you talking about?"
I remember on a big night out. I think it was a Wednesday. I was in the city in Sydney, and it was like 2 or 3 in the morning. I was staggering trying to find my way home.
People are doing the groceries,
and there were still people on the streets. And I'm like, and I'm normally walking around, Queen Street Mall, and I'm the only one just talking to the cleaners and the people picking up cigarettes. I found that a couple of
times. So it is slowly catching up. Like I remember when I first moved up here, I couldn't, I don't think the supermarkets are even open past 5 or something.
Yeah,
crazy.
7
It's
o'clock
like,
they used to be.
how the hell are you supposed to do your groceries
That's
if you've got a
right.
full-time job?
Yeah,
no wonder
exactly.
Saturday mornings are busy.
Yeah.
So it's slowly catching up
Mm.
in that regard, but still a fair way behind. So as it becomes a more metropolitan city, that sort of cafe and music scene and all that sort of stuff will slowly catch up.
Start to come into it,
Yeah.
Mate, look, it's been awesome. Absolutely awesome having you on. Before we leave, how do people get in contact for the Opportunity Fund? Because I think that's probably something that's...
Probably the best place is just go to the website, cfmgcapital.com.au, or just email info@cfmgcapital.com.au, and someone will come back to you.
Yeah, awesome, mate.
Yeah.
Mate, really...
Perfect.
Oh,
No
I can't
worries.
shake your hand, but
Yeah,
footy
Thanks
injury.
for coming, Andrew.
No
Andrew,
worries.
thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks.
Thanks for watching Everything Property. We'll see you again soon. Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.